Hello, I'm Dr. Parag Khanna. I'm a senior fellow at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy at the National University of Singapore. I'm very delighted to present to you my new book, Cartography, Mapping the Future of Global Civilization, and I'm very honored that it's been published here in South Korea. Let me begin with a short overview of the book and some of its ideas and how they are relevant to the Korean country and the Korean people. The first premise of the book is very philosophical and very geographical. Students around the world learn that geography and that their location is the single most important factor in their lives, that it determines their future, determines their destiny. I am making a new argument in this book. I am saying that the most important factor in your life, your city, your country, is how connected it is to other cities, to other countries, to other people. Connectivity determines your power. Connectivity determines your place in the world, in global supply chains. Connectivity determines your destiny in many, many ways. And that is the subject of this book. So it is, in fact, the most fundamental feature of the world is the growing connectivity. So what I do in this book is I present a lot of maps of connectivity. But what is connectivity? Connectivity fundamentally is about infrastructure. All kinds of connectivity, whether it is transportation, how you move around, energy, how you move resources, or communication, how you speak with other people, how you share ideas, all depends on some kind of infrastructure. And so I have mapped the transportation systems, the energy systems, and the communication systems of the whole world. All of the world's infrastructure in these categories is on this map. And I compare it to a human body. Our transportation systems are the skeleton of the planet, and our energy systems are the vascular system of muscles. And the nervous system that shares senses around the body is our communications infrastructure, like the fiber optic internet cables. And all of these infrastructures are much, much longer than all of the borders that divide us. All of the infrastructure that connects us is much bigger than all of the borders that divide us. In fact, we are building more and more infrastructure all the time. Cities, highways, railways, oil pipelines, gas pipelines, electricity grids, internet cables. So in the book, we have the two-dimensional maps. But on the internet, we created an online portal where you can go and see all of the new infrastructures that are being built all the time. And these can be accessed through my website, together with the Harvard Center for Geographical Analysis, which cooperated with me to produce this online atlas of all of the world's infrastructure. I believe we are experiencing what I call a cartographic evolution, an evolution in our maps, but also an evolution in our minds, because maps shape how we think about the world. When students, business people look at maps, often almost all the maps they see are just maps of the borders that divide our countries, that divide North Korea from South Korea, that divide China from Mongolia, from Russia, that divide Canada from America, and so forth. But in fact, all of this connectivity requires that we create new maps, maps with three fundamental layers. And the most fundamental layer is the natural geography, right? Where we have brown for the deserts, green for the forests, blue for the oceans. We also have the maps of political geography, of our borders. Those are the most popular today. But increasingly, we need maps of functional geography, of all of the infrastructure that connects us. And the best maps of the world are the maps that show you all three together. What is the situation of nature, what is the political division, and what is the functional connection. All three layers are necessary to understand the world. And those are the maps that we created for this book and the maps that I explain in the book. The most significant place to see this change is looking at cities. because cities are growing so big and their infrastructure networks are spreading out to connect to other cities. Here are two examples. Singapore is a very small island country, but now its infrastructure is connecting with Malaysia through bridges and railways and through Indonesia. And together, Malaysia, Singapore, and Indonesia are creating joint special economic zones for textiles, for electronics, for shipbuilding, for real estate. 3 countries, but one functional connected economic zone across borders. So you can see the infrastructures. The Pearl River Delta of southern China. This starts from Guangzhou in the north all the way to Hong Kong. 20 years ago, the British nation gave back Hong Kong to China. And in the last 20 years, they have built so much more connectivity between mainland China and Hong Kong. And now it is one mega urban cluster, one mega city. For 50 years, Tokyo was the largest city in the world. But today, this is the largest city in the world, the Pearl River Delta region. And when you have urbanization, infrastructure investment, and international connectivity together in one place, you create a very large economic density. The GDP of this Pearl River Delta region is becoming almost $2 trillion. That is the same as the entire country of India, which has more than 1 billion people. So cities are the most important features on our map, not borders, not countries. Some cities are much bigger economically and even demographically than entire countries. This map shows you all of the people in the world. Every human being is one pixel on this map. And you can see that the largest populations in the world are in Asia, where it's yellow, and also the largest megacity clusters, the largest ovals, are here in Asia as well. And the megacities like the Pearl River Delta region, like Tokyo, Jakarta, Manila, Shanghai, Chongqing, New Delhi, Mumbai, Asia's cities have populations of tens of millions of people, anywhere from 20, 25 million people up to 50 or 60 million people. Seoul is also a megacity, but a very well-functioning city. In many parts of the world, the megacities are very poor, have slums that stretch for hundreds of kilometers, like Nairobi or Lagos in Nigeria, for example, or Sao Paulo in Brazil is the largest city in the Western Hemisphere. But these are the 50 most important cities in the world because they are the largest populations, the largest economies. And they also depend on connectivity. In a city, you cannot measure the domestic size of the economy. Every city also depends a lot on connectivity. How many business travelers are coming? How many airplanes are landing? How many packages are being delivered? How many ships are going in and out? How much investment is coming from around the world? Cities depend on connectivity, not just on the domestic economy. So cities are the driving force of global connectivity. And in this very connected world of cities, we move into a world, to an economic pattern where supply and demand can always meet each other. Supply and demand, I argue, is the most powerful law of history. In a connected world, people, goods, data, money can flow across the world, and supply chains become totally global. Korean companies participate in the electronic supply chain for Chinese companies, for German companies, for American companies. American companies sell their goods here in Korea. I heard that there are more Starbucks per capita in Seoul than in any other city in the world. Western companies, global companies depend on having global supply chains. And you can see for any product, whether it is an automobile, whether it is a vaccine, whether it is a piece of clothing, whether it is a computer, the supply chain is global. And that is in the future of capitalism, especially as things get more and more digital as well. Physical things are also made globally. They're designed in one place, manufactured in another place, tested in a third place, sold in another place, recycled in a fifth place. So the supply chain for everything is global. I argue that instead of on your clothing where it says made in Korea, made in Vietnam, it should say made everywhere, because that is the reality for most things today. Why did Asia become the center for the world's supply chains, one of the most connected regions of the world, with 1/3 of the world's GDP? The story begins by looking at the special economic zones. In the 1950s and 1960s, and famously in the case of Shenzhen in China in 1979, Asia became the hub for foreign investment, for Western companies, to attract investment, to attract technology, to employ locals, to build skills, to boost your industries, to grow Asian exports. And Asian countries began to build up large trade surpluses and large currency reserves. And we have taken that capital in Asia and invested it in infrastructure, in modernization, in progress, in welfare, in wealth. And that is why Korea is a first world country today. That is why Japan is so prosperous. That is why China has become the fastest growing economy, reducing poverty at a rate that has never before been seen in human history. It's because of the supply chain coming to Asia. It's not because of militaries. It's not because of nuclear weapons. It's because of supply chains. Supply chains, I argue, are the source of power in the world. And that is a reminder that progress, that power, actually depends on not just on military power. Military power is the third stage. First, you need technological power, economic power, and then you build military power, right? And that is the pattern in history. So I argue in this triangle that in the 19th century we focused on the geopolitics of territory. In the 20th century we focused on the key economic levers and economic leverage. And in the 21st century we're realizing that we need geotechnology. Those countries that have the leadership in innovation will gain economically and will therefore have the power to extend their influence geopolitically. These are three corners of a triangle: geopolitics, geoeconomics, geotechnology, and we need all three to work together to have a successful society. So when I look at countries, I don't look only at the size of the military, I don't look at natural resources, I don't look at the size of the population only. Those are the traditional things. I look at the innovation, how much is happening in research and development, and what is the quality of the urbanization? How many people are working in advanced areas like science and technology? What is the education level? Those things will tell us how successful a country will be and how influential a country will be. And therefore, war in the 21st century, war in this century, is not just about borders and armies, because that does not happen very often, right? North Korea tests missiles regularly, but you're not having a war with them every day. But there is a war happening every day, and that is a trade war. That is an economic war. That is a supply chain war. And the goal is to capture the highest value in the world's supply chains. And what's happening around the world is that supply chains are in competition, as countries are in competition. And there are different ways of doing supply chains. In Japan, for example, there is the Nagoya model, where Toyota has its headquarters. All of the suppliers and manufacturers are concentrated in one place. In South Korea, you have the Samsung research facilities and corporate facilities here in Seoul. And a lot of the research and development, scientific experimentation, technological research, product development is happening in an ecosystem here in Seoul. And it gives rise to Samsung, one of the most powerful, one of the most wealthy, one of the most successful companies in the entire world. In other countries or companies, the supply chain is very distributed. Parts, research are done everywhere. With information technology companies, you often see that this is the case. And now supply chains are competing and countries are supporting their companies very strongly to acquire technology. China has done this very successfully. When investors go to China, they not only manufacture in China, they have to transfer technology. They have to train Chinese workers. They have to do joint ventures that support Chinese businesses. And then 5 years later, those Chinese businesses are competing worldwide with the companies that they got the technology from. So now China is moving up the value chain. In semiconductors, that used to be dominated by Japan and then by Korea, and now China is doing it. Railway cars, solar panels. In technology after technology, you are facing competition. So Korea has to continue to innovate to stay ahead of China and other countries that are moving up the value chain. And this is the constant war that is going on. And I call it the tug of war. Tug of war is an ancient sport. We are battling two teams, but we are connected by the rope, and the rope is the supply chain. The question is, who sells more to whom? Because you are very connected to China, it's your largest trading partner, but also they are trying to capture the technology so they can sell higher value-added things to you than you sell to them. And every country, every city, every company is participating in this great supply chain war all the time. Trade agreements are a very important part of this because the Trans-Pacific Partnership is no longer happening, but now there is going to be a free trade area of the Asia-Pacific or a regional comprehensive economic partnership. And within the trade frameworks, every country like Korea has to say, how do we protect our innovations, but how do we maximize our market access to fast-growing economies? So South Korea right now is looking strongly at Southeast Asia, at India. How can you boost your exports to those countries? How can you participate in more trade agreements? So I look a lot at the competitive dynamics among these large global trading arrangements, and it's very strategically important for Korea. Right now, China is the largest trading partner for more than 120 countries, and the United States is the leading trade partner for only 50 countries. This is also very geopolitical, not just economic, because historically, trade relationships become investment relationships. Investment relationships become military relationships. So we are just at the early stage of China, of Asian countries, reaching out beyond Asia, reaching globally to develop trade, investment, and strategic relationships, to protect your supply chains, to gain market share around the world. And the whole world is participating in this global economic system today like never before. Every region of the world is connected to every other region of the world. We have been very US-centric in our economic and geopolitical thinking for a very long time. But in fact, now, trade between Asia and Europe is the largest trade inter-regional relationship in the world. In fact, European trade with Korea, with Southeast Asia, with China, with India, with Japan is much larger than European trade with America. And so what can Asia do to strengthen its trade relationships with other Asian countries and with Europe? Because that is the future. Why? Because 2/3 of the world population lives right here on this map. 2/3 of the world population lives in the Asian region, in the greater Asian region, connecting from Japan and Korea on the east all the way to Europe in the west. And so this is going to be the engine of growth. And Korea is a participant now in the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank and the One Belt, One Road. This is the largest coordinated infrastructure investment program in the history of the world. Trillions of dollars will be spent in the coming decades to build these lines of connectivity, to build these oil pipelines, gas pipelines, railways, energy grids, and so forth. And it's very important for Korea to participate in this initiative, to access these new markets. And you can even build peace. Eventually, I believe there will be common infrastructure linking from Korea through the north to Russia and to China. Because you can see on this map over time that the infrastructural connectivity always overwhelms the political boundaries, always. Even in the most difficult situations in the world, eventually infrastructure always wins. And so you must be an active participant in that infrastructure. And Southeast Asia, a similar pattern is happening. The Southeast Asian countries are growing more and more densely together through infrastructure. And now these countries in Southeast Asia, which has only half the population of China, gets more foreign investment than China. And with about half the population of India, has a larger GDP than India, $2.5 trillion across these 10 countries. And this is a very big opportunity for the world's engineering, procurement, and construction companies. And Korea has a very substantial number, like Hyundai, like Samsung. Your companies are crucial to building these new Silk Roads of trade. And so Korean companies must also participate very actively in the Asian integration process as a source of profit, as a source of growing business in new markets. Again, this is reshaping geopolitics. Traditionally, we think of geopolitics as dominance through military conquest and through colonial government. Today, the way it is happening is through infrastructural development to smooth the passageway for goods. This is how economies are getting reorganized. Today, you can see that across Eurasia, the linkages between Europe and Asia are changing the geopolitical mindset. Asia is thinking less about America and more about Europe. Europe is thinking less about America and more about Asia. And that is why you can see right now the German government and the American government do not get along. American government says to Germany, your trade surpluses are too high. The German government says, actually, we are exporting lots to Asia, so we will keep on with our strong trade surpluses. Asia and Europe understand each other on climate change, on trade, on geopolitical issues. And so I believe that this axis is going to deepen in the years ahead. All of this connectivity is contributing to a world map and a world situation that I believe is very stable and very peaceful. Right now we live in a world where we think there is a lot of volatility, a lot of danger, a lot of risk. But actually, the more infrastructure and connectivity we build, the more resilience we create. Why? Because resilience is about having multiple pathways, multiple options to connect supply and demand. Let's look at the most important feature, energy. Energy is considered a source of geopolitical tension. 5 years ago, we were very concerned that America and China might fight a war over oil or gas in the Middle Eastern countries, or that if there is a geopolitical disruption in any of these three red dots, the Suez Canal, the Strait of Hormuz, the Straits of Malacca, these are the three maritime choke points in the world. 80% of the oil and gas that is consumed by Japan, by Korea, by China, flows through the Straits of Malacca by Singapore, a very narrow body of water. So whenever there is a geopolitical dispute, we worry that oil prices will go very, very high. But today oil prices are very low. Why? Because we have more supply than ever. We have more connectivity between markets than ever. So instead of America and China fighting over oil, instead, America now sells oil to China directly. And China is the fastest growing consumer of American oil. Now look at the One Belt, One Road projects. What if there are oil pipelines across Eurasia linking China and Kazakhstan and the Caspian Sea and Iran and Iraq? That means that if there is a blockage of shipping, you can transfer energy over land. You can also go via the Arctic. Korea and Japan are building a lot of liquid natural gas tankers so that you can ship gas from the Arctic Ocean through the Bering Strait all the way down here to Asia. So more connectivity, more infrastructure means there is more than one way for supply to meet demand. And that applies to oil, to gas, it applies to shipping, to goods, to cars, to televisions, it applies to data. The more internet cables a country has, the more resilient it is. If one cable gets cut, then your internet data still comes from the other cables. So more connectivity means more resilience, means more stability. So yes, we do live in a world that is risky, a world that is dangerous. But if we continue to invest in connectivity, we will ultimately build a world that is not only more stable than our current world, but it will be an entirely new map, an entirely new way of organizing humanity based on cities, based on connectivity, based less on countries and boundaries. And that is the evolution that we are undergoing, and that is what the maps of connectography show us. So thank you very much for allowing me to present connectography briefly to you. I hope you enjoy the book, and I look forward to our conversation. Thank you.